Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet History Vault. Tonight we step into a world where darkness is not just an absence but a presence you can feel pressing gently against your skin. You stand at the edge of evening, watching the last light of the sun slip below the horizon, and you realize something unsettling. There is no switch to flip, no soft glow waiting in the corner of the room. When the light is gone, it is truly gone. And you probably would not survive this as comfortably as you imagine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, feel free to share your location and local time. It is always fascinating to see where in the world you are listening from. Now dim the lights. You notice how quickly the world changes once the sun disappears. The familiar shapes around you begin to soften. Edges blur and colours fade into a quiet, uncertain grey. In a time before electricity, this transition is not gradual in the way you're used to. It feels immediate, almost decisive, as though the day itself has chosen to withdraw. A widely accepted historical reality is that for most of human history, artificial light was extremely limited and often expensive. Even something as simple as a candle required resources, labour and careful use. You do not waste light here. You ration it, protect it, and think twice before using it at all. You step inside your home and the darkness follows you in. It gathers in the corners first, then stretches slowly across the floor. There is a moment where you simply stand still, letting your eyes adjust, feeling your way through space that you know well, but can no longer clearly see. Then comes the small ritual that changes everything. You reach for a flame. Perhaps it is a candle, its wax slightly uneven, its wick already shortened from previous nights. Or perhaps it is an oil lamp, faintly smelling of animal fat or plant oil. When you light it, the transformation is immediate but limited. The room does not flood with brightness. Instead, a small circle of warm, flickering light appears, pushing the darkness back just a little. You realize how different this is from modern lighting. There is no steady glow. The flame moves constantly, dancing with the slightest draft, casting shadows that stretch and shrink across the walls. Your surroundings feel alive in a subtle, almost hypnotic way. A curious detail that often surprises people is that in some periods people would trim candle wicks carefully throughout the evening to keep the flame steady and reduce smoke. It was a small, almost meditative task, one that required attention and patience. You cannot simply ignore your light source. You must tend to it like a quiet companion. You sit down and the room settles with you. The sounds of the outside world begin to change. Without the hum of electricity, there is no background noise to soften the edges of silence. Every sound becomes clearer. The faint creak of wood as the house cools. The distant call of an animal. The whisper of wind slipping through cracks in the walls. It's not silence as you know it. It is deeper, more layered, almost textured. You begin to understand that night in this world is not an extension of the day. It is something entirely different. Your activities slow not by choice, but by necessity. Reading becomes difficult unless you bring the light close, and even then your eyes tire quickly. Movement requires care. A misplaced step in the dark can mean injury. Historians still argue whether people in pre-electric societies experienced darkness as more frightening or simply more familiar than we would today. It is tempting to assume they were used to it, that they moved through it with ease, but there are hints in old writings and records that suggest a lingering unease. Darkness was not just inconvenient, it was unpredictable. You feel that now as you glance toward the far corner of the room where the light does not quite reach. It is not that anything is there, it is that you cannot be entirely sure, and so you adjust your behaviour. You stay closer to the light. You organise your space so that important objects are within reach. You learn to move slowly, deliberately, trusting memory more than sight. Over time, your senses shift. Your hearing becomes sharper. Your awareness of space becomes more intuitive. There is something almost calming in this adjustment, though you might not expect it. The limitations of light create a natural boundary for your day. You cannot do everything at once. You cannot stretch your time endlessly into the night. Instead, you begin to accept a different rhythm. A well-known aspect of life before electricity is that evenings were often shorter and more focused. People gathered around a single light source, sharing stories, conversation, or quiet tasks. The circle of light became a small world of its own, intimate and contained. You imagine sitting there with others, the room between you faces softly illuminated while the rest of the room fades into shadow. There is a closeness in that arrangement, a sense of shared presence that feels different from modern life. You're not distracted by glowing screens or distant noise. You're simply there together in the flicker of a single flame. And yet there is always that awareness at the edge of your mind. The light is temporary. The candle will burn down, the oil will run low, and when it does, the darkness will return fully without compromise. This awareness shapes your decisions in subtle ways. You begin to think ahead. How much light do you have left? Is this task worth the cost of another hour of flame? Should you save it for something more important? It's a constant calculation, one that you rarely have to consider in your own time. You notice too how the quality of the light affects your mood. It is warmer, softer, more fragile. It invites you to slow down, to focus on smaller things. The way the flame bends when you move, the gentle glow on your hands, the shifting shadows that seem to breathe along the walls. There is no harsh brightness here, no sudden glare, just a steady living light that asks for your attention and rewards it with a quiet sense of presence. As the evening deepens, you feel your body responding in ways that might surprise you. Without artificial light to extend your day, your natural rhythms begin to take over. Your eyes grow heavier, your thoughts slow. There is a gentle pull toward rest that feels almost inevitable. You realize that in this world you do not control the night. The night in a quiet and patient way controls you. And as you sit there watching the flame flicker and listening to the subtle sounds around you, you begin to understand something simple but profound. Life without electricity is not just slower, it is more deliberate. Every action carries weight. Every moment of light has meaning. The darkness is not merely an absence, it is a presence that shapes your world, guiding you into a rhythm that feels in its own way deeply human. You take one last look at the small circle of light around you, aware of how precious it is and how temporary, and slowly, almost without noticing, you begin to follow it into the quiet unfolding of the night. You wake not to a sound, but to a change in the air. At first, it is so subtle you almost miss it. The darkness around you has softened no longer, thick and complete, but touched by something faint and grey. Your eyes open slowly, adjusting not to a sudden brightness, but to a gradual return of the world itself. There is no alarm clock ringing beside your bed, no artificial glow forcing you awake. Instead, morning arrives like a quiet invitation. A commonly accepted historical understanding is that before electricity, most people rose and slept in close alignment with the sun. Your body follows this rhythm naturally now. You do not fight it. You simply move with it. You lie still for a moment, listening. The sounds of early morning are delicate, almost hesitant. A distant bird begins its call tentative at first, then more confident. Somewhere nearby, wood shifts with a soft creak as the structure of the house responds to the changing temperature. The air itself feels cooler, fresher, carrying the faint scent of earth and ash. You stretch slowly, feeling the stiffness in your limbs. The night has not been perfectly comfortable. The bed beneath you is simple, perhaps a straw-filled mattress or layered fabric, and you can still sense the firmness beneath the surface. Yet there is something grounding about it. You feel connected to the space, to the quiet that still lingers before the day fully begins. A curious detail from historical records suggests that in many households people did not leap out of bed immediately upon waking. Instead, they often lingered, allowing the light to grow and their senses to fully return. It was a slower transition into the day one that you begin to appreciate as you remain still, watching the faint light shift along the walls. The room gradually reveals itself. Shapes return first, the outline of a chair, the edge of a table, the soft rise of blankets beside you. Colours follow more slowly as the grey deepens into muted tones. There is no sudden clarity. Everything emerges gently as though the world itself is waking alongside you. You sit up, drawing in a breath that feels sharper than the night air. Without modern insulation, the chill of early morning reaches you easily. You pull your covering closer around your shoulders, instinctively conserving warmth. Historians still debate whether people in pre-industrial societies experienced mornings as more refreshing or more physically demanding than we do today. On one hand, the alignment with natural light could support healthier sleep patterns. On the other, waking often meant immediate exposure to cold discomfort and the tasks of survival. You begin to feel that tension now. There is a calmness in this moment, a quiet clarity. But there is also an awareness that the day ahead will require effort. Nothing will be instant. Nothing will be effortless. So you swing your feet to the floor, noticing how cold the surface feels against your skin. It wakes you more effectively than any alarm. You stand slowly, giving your body time to adjust. The light continues to strengthen, though it is still soft, filtered through whatever small openings your home allows. Windows, if present, are modest, designed to preserve warmth rather than flood the interior with brightness. The morning light enters carefully as if it too must respect the limits of the space. You move toward the source of that light, perhaps a narrow window or a simple opening. Outside, the world is still in transition. The sky carries a pale glow, not yet fully blue, and the landscape holds a quiet stillness that feels almost suspended. A well-known aspect of life before electricity is that the beginning of the day was often marked not by a specific time, but by visible changes in light. You would judge your schedule by the position of the sun, by the brightness of the sky, by the shadows cast across the ground. Time is no longer something you check, it is something you observe. You step outside or perhaps simply lean closer to the opening and the morning air meets you fully now. It is cool, carrying the scent of damp soil, faint smoke from distant hearths, and the subtle freshness of dew settling on grass and wood. There is movement beginning around you, not fast, not hurried, but steady. Someone nearby opens a door. You hear the soft scrape of it against the ground. Footsteps follow, measured and deliberate. Another household like yours is beginning its day in quiet coordination with the rising sun. A quirky but fascinating detail from the past is that many people relied on the sounds of their community to gauge the start of the day. The crowing of roosters, the movement of neighbours, even the rhythm of early chores all served as informal signals that morning had arrived. You begin to notice those signals now. A faint clatter as something is set down. The distant murmur of voices, the first signs of activity that ripple outwards, slowly bringing the world to life. There is no rush. Without artificial lighting, there is little reason to wake before the light allows it. And without the pressure of precise clocks governing every moment, the pace of the morning feels more fluid. You move when it feels appropriate. You begin when the conditions are right. Yet this slower pace does not mean less work. In fact, it often means more. You turn back inside already aware of what must come next. The fire must be rekindled. Food must be prepared. Water may need to be fetched. Each task waits quietly, patient but unavoidable. There is no illusion of ease here. Still, there is something unexpectedly peaceful about the way the day begins. You are not jolted awake. You are not immediately pulled into a stream of noise and urgency. Instead, you ease into motion, guided by light, by sound, by the subtle cues of your environment. You notice how your thoughts feel different in this moment. They are not scattered, not pulled in multiple directions. There is a clarity that comes from the simplicity of your surroundings. You are aware of what needs to be done, and that awareness feels steady, manageable. A widely recognized feature of pre-electric life is the absence of constant stimulation. Without screens, notifications, or artificial light extending your waking hours, your mind is given space to rest and reset. You're not overwhelmed with information, you're simply present. You take another breath, deeper this time, and feel the quiet settle around you. The light has grown stronger now. The room behind you is no longer shadowed, but softly illuminated. The day is fully arriving whether you are ready or not, and so you begin to move with it. There is a rhythm here that you are only just starting to understand. A rhythm shaped not by devices or schedules, but by the steady, predictable cycle of the sun. It is both limiting and liberating, guiding your actions in ways that feel almost instinctive. You take a final moment to stand in that threshold between stillness and activity, between night and day. Then, with a quiet sense of purpose, you step forward into the morning, ready to begin again. You feel it before you fully see it. The air inside your home still carries the faint memory of last night's warmth, but it's fading quickly. The cold is beginning to settle in again, creeping along the floor, brushing against your ankles, slipping into the quiet spaces between objects. The light of morning may be growing, but it brings no heat with it. And so almost without that thinking, you turn toward the hearth. It sits there waiting, a darkened space filled with grey ash and the quiet remains of yesterday's fire. At first glance it looks lifeless, cold, finished. But you know better now, this is not an end, it is a beginning. A well-established historical reality is that in pre-electric homes, the hearth was the centre of daily life. It provided warmth, light, and the ability to cook. Without it, the house was not just uncomfortable, it was barely livable. You kneel beside it, feeling the rough texture of the floor beneath your knees. There is a certain familiarity in this posture, as though your body already understands the importance of what you're about to do. You lean closer and study the ashes. There is a subtle art to this. You're not simply starting a fire. You're searching for life hidden within what appears to be nothing. You shift the ash gently, careful not to scatter it too quickly. And there it is, a faint glow, almost invisible, a small pocket of warmth still holding on from the night before. You feel a quiet sense of relief. A curious and often overlooked detail is that many households would carefully bank their fires overnight, covering embers with ash to preserve them until morning. It saved time, effort, and precious materials. Starting a fire from scratch was not always easy, especially in damp or cold conditions. You understand why now. You gather small pieces of kindling, thin and dry, and arrange them with care. There is no rushing this. The placement matters. Air must be able to move through the structure, feeding the ember, encouraging it to grow. You lean in and blow gently. The ember responds slowly at first, then with a faint, steady glow. You feel the warmth brush against your face, subtle but unmistakable. Small thread of smoke rises, curling into the air with a sharp, earthy scent. You continue, patient, steady, your breath measured. There is something deeply calming about this moment. Your attention narrows. The world beyond the hearth fades away. It is just you, the ember, and the quiet effort of bringing it back to life. Historians still argue whether firemaking was considered a routine chore or a skilled task that carried a quiet sense of pride. Watching the ember grow, feeling the small success of each flicker, it is easy to imagine that it was both. The flame appears almost suddenly. A thin tongue of fire catches on the edge of the kindling, hesitates, then strengthens. You pause, watching carefully, making sure it holds. Another piece catches, then another. The fire begins to build, not dramatically, but steadily like a breath returning after a long pause. You sit back slightly, giving it such space, allowing it to grow. The warmth spreads slowly, reaching your hands first, then your face. It is not the overwhelming heat of modern systems. It is gentle, gradual, something you feel building over time. You become aware of how your body responds to it, how you instinctively lean closer, seeking that comfort. A mainstream historical observation is that heating in pre-electric homes was highly localized. Only the areas near the fire were truly warm. The rest of the space remained cool, sometimes uncomfortably so. You do not heat the house, you gather around the heat. You begin to understand why people arranged their lives this way. Chairs, stools, and daily activities all center around this single point. The hearth is not just a tool, it is the heart of the home, drawing everything toward it. You add a slightly larger piece of wood, now testing the strength of the flame. It catches slowly but surely, and the fire grows more confident. The crackle becomes more pronounced, a steady rhythm that fills the space with sound. It's a comforting sound, one that seems to settle into your mind as easily as the warmth settles into your body. A quirky detail from the past is that some people believe the behavior of a fire could reveal small signs about the day ahead. A lively flame might suggest good fortune, while a stubborn one could hint at challenges. Whether or not anyone truly believed it, the idea reflects how closely people observe these everyday elements. You find yourself watching the fire in a similar way, the way it moves. the way it responds. There's a subtle conversation happening here, one that does not require words. The smoke shifts as the fire strengthens, rising more cleanly now, though, still carrying that familiar scent of wood and ash. It lingers in the air, clinging to surfaces, to clothing to you. It becomes part of the atmosphere of your life. There is no escaping it, and yet over time you would likely stop noticing it as strongly. It would become normal, another layer of the environment that defined your world. You extend your hands toward the flame, palms open, feeling the heat gather there. It is a simple pleasure, but a meaningful one. You've created this warmth. You have brought light back into the space. There is a quiet satisfaction in that. A well-known aspect of daily life in this era is that such tasks were repeated every single day. There were no shortcuts, no automated systems to take over. Each morning required attention, effort, and a certain level of care. You begin to see how this shapes your mindset. You cannot rush through your day. You cannot ignore the small things. They matter too much. Each action supports the next. Each task builds toward comfort, survival, and a sense of stability. You sit there for a moment longer, simply watching. The flames rise and fall, shifting with subtle changes in air and fuel. Shadows dance along the walls, more lively now, more defined. The room feels different, warmer, more alive. You realize how much this single act has changed your surroundings. Without the horde fire, the house felt still, almost dormant. Now it feels active, responsive, ready for the day ahead. You begin to think about what comes next. Food will need to be prepared, and this fire will make it possible. Water may be heated, tools may be warmed. The hearth will continue to serve you in ways both obvious and subtle, but for now you allow yourself this pause, this moment of quiet success. You have taken something fragile, almost gone, and brought it back. You have created warmth where there was cold light, where there was shadow. And in doing so, you have taken your first true step into the rhythm of this slower, more deliberate way of living. The fire crackles softly, steady and reliable, as if acknowledging your effort. And you, still seated beside it, begin to feel ready for whatever the day will ask of you next. The warmth from the fire reaches you first, but it does not travel far. You notice it as you rise, stepping just a little away from the hearth. The comfort fades almost immediately. The air shifts cooler again, brushing against your skin in a way that reminds you how fragile that warmth really is. It belongs to the fire, not to the house. And so before anything else, you turn your attention to what you are wearing. Clothing here is not a matter of style or quick decision. It is preparation. It is protection. It is in many ways your first line of defense against a world that does not adjust itself for your comfort. A widely recognized reality of life before modern heating is that people relied heavily on layered clothing to maintain body warmth even indoors. Homes, especially in colder regions, were rarely evenly heated. The difference between standing near the hearth and stepping into another part of the room could feel surprisingly sharp. You reach for your garments, noticing their weight immediately. Fabrics are thicker than what you're used to. Wool linens, perhaps rough-spun materials that carry a faint scent of smoke and use. These are not light, breathable layers designed for convenience. They're built for endurance. You begin with a base layer, something close to your skin. It is not particularly soft, but it serves its purpose. Over that you add another layer, then another. Each piece overlaps, trapping pockets of air that will hold on to warmth. There is a rhythm to this process. You do not rush, you adjust each layer carefully, making sure it sits correctly, that it does not bunch or restrict your movement too much. Comfort here is not about lightness, it is about balance. Too few layers and the cold will find you quickly. Too many and your movements become slow-heavy. A curious detail from historical clothing practices is that people often slept in some of their garments during colder months rather than changing entirely for the night. It saved time in the morning and helped preserve body heat through long, chilly hours. You can understand why. As you finish dressing, you feel the difference immediately. The cold no longer reaches you as sharply. It is still there, present in the air, but softened, held at a distance by the layers you have chosen. You move your arms, testing the range. There is a slight stiffness, a reminder that flexibility comes at a cost. Your body adjusts, learning to work within these constraints. There is something grounding in this awareness. You are constantly aware of your body and space, the weight of the fabric, the way it shifts as you move, the subtle friction between layers. Nothing is effortless, but nothing is entirely uncomfortable either. It simply requires attention. Historians still debate whether people in colder climates adapted so fully to these conditions that they felt less discomfort than we might assume. Some evidence suggests that tolerance to cold was higher, while other accounts describe persistent struggles to stay warm. You sense that the truth likely rests somewhere in between. You walk a few steps away from the hearth again, this time more prepared. The chill meets you, but it does not bite as deeply. Your clothing holds steady, doing exactly what it was meant to do. You glance down at your hands, noticing how exposed they are. Fingers stiffen quickly in cool air, and you instinctively rub them together. Gloves, if available, would be practical, though not always worn indoors. You begin to understand how small choices like this shape your comfort throughout the day. A lesser known but fascinating aspect of historical life is that people often used accessories such as cloaks, shawls, or even small personal heaters to manage temperature changes within a home. These items could be adjusted or removed as needed, offering a kind of flexibility that fixed heating systems do not require. You imagine pulling a cloak closer around your shoulders as you move through a colder part of the house, then loosening it again as you return to the fire. Your environment is not constant, so your clothing must adapt with you. You step toward the doorway, feeling a faint draft slip through the edges. It is subtle but noticeable. Buildings of this time are not sealed in the way modern homes are. Small gaps allow air to pass freely, bringing with it the outside temperature, the scent of the environment, the quiet reminder that you are not fully separated from the world beyond. You pause there for a moment, aware of how your clothing now forms a boundary between you and that world. It is not perfect, but it is enough. An established understanding among scholars is that clothing in this period served not only practical purposes, but also reflected available resources and social standing. The materials, the number of layers, even the condition of the garments could reveal much about a person's life. You notice the wear on the fabric, slight thinning in places, subtle repairs where threads have been reinforced. These are not disposable items. They are maintained, cared for, used again and again. You run your hand along the sleeve, feeling the texture beneath your fingers. It carries history in a way the modern clothing rarely does. Each mark, each imperfection tells a small part of a larger story. You shift your weight, adjusting the way the layers settle around you. There is a quiet satisfaction in this preparation. You've equipped yourself for the day not with convenience but with intention. And yet there is still a constant awareness. The cold has not disappeared. It lingers in the background, waiting for moments of distraction, for gaps in your preparation. It reminds you to stay mindful, to pay attention to your surroundings, to your own comfort. You take a step back toward the hearth, feeling the warmth greet you once more. The contrast is immediate, almost surprising. It highlights just how much your environment can change within a few steps. You begin to understand why people of this time arranged their lives around these variations. Where you sit, where you stand, where you work, all of it is influenced by temperature. You choose your position carefully, seeking that balance between warmth and function. There is no setting to adjust, no dial to turn, only your own awareness and the choices you make. You take a deep breath, feeling the layers around you, the warmth from the fire, the cool air just beyond it. It is a delicate balance, one that requires constant attention but offers a certain kind of control. In this world, comfort is not given. It's built piece by piece, layer by layer, moment by moment. And as you stand there fully dressed, fully aware, you feel ready to step further into the day, carrying that warmth with you as best you can. The fire is steady now, and the warmth it gives feels just enough to begin the next task. You glance toward the simple space where food is prepared, already aware that what comes next will take time. Not a few minutes, not something quick and effortless. Time here stretches differently, especially when it comes to eating. You do not reach for a button or a device. There is no quiet hum of a machine ready to assist you. Instead, you begin with what you have, and what you have is raw, unprepared, and waiting. A broadly accepted historical understanding is that food preparation before modern technology required significant time and physical effort, often forming one of the central activities of the day. Meals were not just consumed, they were built from the ground up step by step. You move closer to the hearth knowing that this is where everything begins. The fire you revived now takes on a new role. It is no longer just a source of warmth, it becomes your tool, your partner in the process of turning basic ingredients into something nourishing. You gather what is available. Perhaps it is grain that must be ground or already ground, but coarse and uneven. Perhaps there are vegetables, root-heavy and still carrying traces of soil. Maybe there is a small portion of meat, preserved or fresh, depending on the day and the season. Nothing is pre-prepared. You begin with the simplest task, though it is not truly simple at all. You handle the grain, feeling its texture dry and slightly rough against your fingers. If it needs further grinding, that alone becomes a process of steady motion, repetitive and patient. A curious detail from historical kitchens is that the sound of grinding grain was once a common background rhythm of daily life, a steady, almost meditative noise that marked the beginning of food preparation in many households. You can almost hear it now, that low, consistent movement as though time itself is being measured through effort. You pause, shifting your attention to the water. It must be added, measured not by precise tools but by experience. You pour carefully, watching how the mixture changes, how it thickens or loosens depending on your touch. There is no exact recipe to follow in the way you might expect. Instead, there is intuition developed through repetition and observation. Historians still debate whether this intuitive approach led to greater skill in cooking or more inconsistency in daily meals. Standing here, you sense that it likely produced both. Some meals would be better than others, shaped by small differences in ingredients, timing and attention. You bring the mixture closer to the fire. Heat must be managed carefully. Too close and the food may burn, too far and it may not cook properly at all. You adjust your position, feeling the warmth on your hands, watching the subtle changes as the food begins to respond. The scent starts to rise slowly. It is not immediate. It builds gradually, a gentle shift from raw to something more inviting. The smell of grain warming, of moisture turning into steam, of something simple becoming something sustaining. You find yourself leaning in, slightly attentive to every change. A lesser known but fascinating aspect of early cooking is that much of it depended on constant presence. You could not simply leave food unattended. It required watching, stirring, adjusting, responding to the behavior of the fire. You stir slowly, feeling the resistance of the mixture, noticing how it thickens with time. The motion becomes rhythmic, almost soothing, as though you are guiding the process, rather than forcing it. There is a quiet satisfaction in this. You are not rushing, you cannot rush. The fire dictates the pace and you follow. You glance at the other ingredients, considering what else might be added. A piece of vegetable cut, carefully added at the right moment. Perhaps a small amount of preserved meat, if available, introduced slowly so it warms evenly. Each addition changes the character of the meal. Scholars continue to discuss how limited ingredients shaped creativity in historical cooking. With fewer options, people often relied on subtle variations in preparation to create variety. A change in timing, a slight difference in proportion, could transform a familiar dish into something new. You begin to understand that creativity here is not about abundance. It is about attention. You continue to stir the heat from the fire, brushing against your face, your hands moving steadily. The room fills gradually with the scent of cooking, warm and comforting, blending with the ever-present trace of smoke. It is a smell that would linger, settling into the walls, the fabric, the air itself. You notice how your body responds. There is a sense of anticipation, but also patience. You're involved in every stage of the process, from the raw beginning to the finished result. Nothing is hidden, nothing is automated. You taste a small portion, careful not to burn yourself. The flavor is simple but real. There is no excess, no unnecessary complexity, just the essence of the ingredient shaped by heat and time. A well-documented reality of pre-electric life is that meals often reflected what was immediately available rather than what was desired. Season, location and circumstance determined what you ate far more than preference. You accept that without resistance. There is a certain clarity in it. You continue working, adjusting the position of the pot or vessel, making small corrections as needed. The fire responds sometimes stronger, sometimes softer, and you respond in turn. It is a quiet dialogue. You begin to see how this process shapes your day. It requires presence, attention, and a willingness to engage with each moment. There is no distraction pulling you away, no device demanding your focus, just the task in front of you. As the food reaches its final stage, you feel a subtle shift. The texture is right, the scent has deepened. The movement of your stirring changes slightly as the mixture settles into its finished form. You remove it from the heat carefully. There is a brief pause, a moment where you simply look at what you have created. It may not seem remarkable by modern standards, but here in this moment it represents effort, time, and care. You take another taste more confident now. It's warm, grounding, satisfying in a way that feels connected to the work you've just done. You realize that eating here is not just about consumption, it is about process. Every meal carries the memory of its creation, the steps you took, the choices you made, the patience you practiced. It becomes part of your experience, not just something you pass through quickly. You sit closer to the fire bowl or portion in hand, feeling the warmth on your skin as you begin to eat. The day has only just begun, yet you have already invested time and effort into something essential. And as you take each slow, deliberate bite, you begin to understand how deeply this slower rhythm shapes not just your action, but your entire way of living. You finish the last of your meal slowly, almost without realizing it. There is no rush urging you forward, no clock pressing against your thoughts. The warmth from the fire still lingers, and for a brief moment you remain seated, letting that sense of quiet satisfaction settle into your body. But the day is already moving, even if it does not feel hurried. Work is waiting, not in the distant, abstract way you might be used to, but in a direct and immediate sense. It exists around you, in the tools nearby, in the land beyond your door, in the simple fact that survival depends on what you do next. A commonly accepted historical observation is that before industrialization, most labour followed the rhythm of daylight and physical endurance. There were no fixed office hours, no artificial extension of productivity into the night. Work began when light allowed it and slowed as that light faded. You stand feeling the layers of your clothing shift with you and take a moment to prepare. There is no single task that defines your day. Instead, there is a sequence, a chain of responsibilities that flow into one another. Some are predictable, repeated daily. Others change with the season, the weather, or unexpected needs. You step outside and the difference in light is immediately noticeable. Morning has strengthened into something clearer now. The pale softness has given way to a more defined brightness, though still gentle compared to the harsh glare you might be familiar with. The air feels sharper, carrying the scent of soil wood and distant activity. You begin your work. It might involve tending to land, repairing something worn, gathering materials, or preparing for tasks that will come later in the day. Whatever it is, it requires your full attention. There are no shortcuts here. Each action must be done properly, or it will need to be done again. A widely recognized truth is that physical labor dominated daily life for the majority of people before electricity. Tasks that are now automated or simplified required sustained effort, often engaging the entire body. You feel that immediately. Your movements are doing. Your hands are involved in everything. There is weight resistance texture in every action. Whether you are lifting, carrying, shaping, or tending your body is constantly engaged. There is a rhythm to it, not fast, not frantic, but steady. You find a pace that you can maintain, one that matches your energy rather than pushing beyond it. You begin to understand that endurance matters more than speed. A lesser known but intriguing detail is that many forms of labour are accompanied by small patterns of rest built naturally into the work. Brief pauses, shifts in posture, moments of stillness that allowed the body to recover without stopping entirely. You notice yourself doing this. You pause not because you're finished, but because your body asks for it. A breath, a shift in position, a glance around to assess what comes next. These moments do not feel like interruptions, they feel like part of the process. Historians continue to examine whether this style of work created a healthier balance between effort and rest compared to modern systems, or whether it simply reflected the limitations of human capacity. As you move through your tasks, you sense both possibilities. There is strain, certainly, but there is also a kind of clarity. You are not dividing your attention between multiple demands. You are not pulled in different directions by unseen forces. You are here in this moment, focused on what is directly in front of you. The sounds around you form a quiet background. The movement of others nearby engaged in their own work. The subtle noise of tools meeting material. The occasional call of a voice not loud but present enough to remind you that you are not alone in this rhythm. A quirky detail from historical accounts suggests that people often developed a strong awareness of each other's routines simply by listening to these sounds. The pattern of activity became a kind of shared language understood without words. You begin to recognize that pattern, the way one task leads into another, the way the morning gradually shifts toward midday, the way energy rises, then steadies, then begins to ease. You continue working, adjusting your pace as needed. There is no artificial pressure to maintain constant output. Instead, your productivity is tied to your ability to sustain effort over time. You learn to conserve energy to avoid unnecessary strain, to work with your body rather than against it. An established insight into pre-modern labour is that skill often came from repetition rather than formal instruction. You learn by doing, by observing, by correcting small mistakes over time. You feel that process unfolding within you. Each movement becomes slightly more efficient. Each decision becomes a little more intuitive. You begin to trust your own judgment, guided by experience rather than strict rules. The sun climbs higher, and with it the light becomes stronger. You notice how it changes the way you work. Shadows shorten. Details become clearer. Tasks that were more difficult earlier in the morning now feel easier simply because you can see them better. Time again reveals itself not through numbers but through light. Scholars still debate how people in these periods perceive time without constant measurement. Did it feel slower, more expansive, or simply different in ways that are difficult to describe? As you move through your work, you sense that time here is less about counting and more about experience. You're aware of its passage, but not in a way that creates urgency. There is a quiet continuity instead. You pause again, this time longer, letting your body rest. You look around, taking in the space, the light, the subtle movement of the day. There is no immediate need to fill this moment. It exists on its own. Then naturally you return to your task. The work continues not because you are forced, but because it is necessary. It supports everything else. The food you eat, the warmth you rely on, the stability of your surroundings. You begin to see how deeply connected these elements are. Nothing stands alone. Each action feeds into another, creating a cycle that repeats day after day. It may seem simple, but it is also complex in its interdependence. You feel a growing respect for that system. It is not easy, but it is honest. As the light continues to shift, you become aware that the day will not last forever. The same sun that allows you to work will eventually begin to fade, and with it your ability to continue. This awareness shapes your choices. You prioritize. You decide what must be done now and what can wait. You manage your energy knowing that you cannot extend your day beyond what the light permits. And so you continue steady and focused, moving through your work with a sense of purpose that feels both grounding and real. There is no illusion here. Only effort, time, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that what you do matters directly and immediately to the life you are living. By the time your body begins to feel the steady weight of work, you become more aware of the space you return to. Your home is not simply a place to rest. It is a structure shaped carefully around survival, around the management of heat, light, and air. Every beam, every opening, every surface reflects choices made with purpose. You step back inside and the shift is immediate. The brightness of the outside softens. The sounds change, becoming quieter, more contained. The air feels different too, touched by smoke, warmth, and the lingering presence of the fire you built earlier. An established understanding among historians is that pre-electric homes were designed with a central focus on the hearth, which acted as the main source of heat and light. The layout of the space often revolved around this single point, influencing how people moved, gathered, and lived. You can see that clearly now. The hearth draws your attention without effort. It sits at the centre, not just physically, but functionally. Everything seems to orbit around it. Seating is arranged to face it. Tools are kept within reach of it. Even your movements tend to circle back toward it as though guided by an invisible line. You walk slowly through the space, noticing details you might have overlooked before. The walls are not smooth in the way some modern surfaces are. They carry texture, slight irregularities that catch the light differently depending on where you stand. Small shadows form in the uneven places, giving the room a sense of depth that shifts throughout the day. The windows, if present, are modest. They allow light to enter, but they do not dominate the structure. Their size reflects a balance between letting in daylight and keeping warmth inside. A lesser-known detail is that glass, when available, was often limited or of uneven quality, meaning that windows could distort the light or view slightly. In many cases, coverings or shutters were used instead, further controlling how much light entered the home. You move closer to one of these openings, watching how the sunlight filters through. It is softer than what you're used to, shaped by the material diffused in a way that feels almost gentle. The floor beneath your feet carries its own story. It may be packed earthwood or stone, each with its own character. You feel it through your steps, the slight give or firmness, the coolness that remains even as the fire warms the air above it. Nothing here is uniform. Everything has variation, small differences that you begin to notice more as you move through the space. Scholars still debate how these environmental variations influence daily comfort and behaviour. Some suggest that people adapted so fully that they rarely noticed these differences, while others argue that constant adjustment was simply a normal part of life. You sense that it is something you learn to live with rather than eliminate. You pause near the hearth, again watching the fire. It has settled into a steady burn, now no longer fragile but not overwhelming either. It provides just enough warmth to create a small zone of comfort, a place where you naturally return after time spent in cooler parts of the house. A curious detail from historical homes is that smoke was often an unavoidable presence, especially in structures without proper chimneys. It would rise, linger, and slowly find its way out through openings in the roof or walls. You notice that now. There is a faint haze near the upper part of the room, barely visible but present. The scent is constant, not unpleasant, but unmistakable. It clings to everything, becoming part of the identity of the space. You breathe it in without resistance. It is simply part of where you are. You move toward a small area set aside for storage, perhaps a simple shelf or chest. The items there are few, but each one has a clear purpose. There is no excess, no accumulation of unnecessary objects. A widely recognized feature of life in this period is the practical nature of possessions. Items were valued for their usefulness and durability. Space was not filled for decoration alone, but for function. You reach out and touch one of these objects, feeling its weight, its texture. It is solid, dependable, designed to last. There is a quiet reassurance in that. You turn back towards the center of the room, noticing how the light has shifted again. The sun has moved higher and the angle of light entering the space has changed. Shadows that were long and soft earlier are now shorter, more defined. Time reveals itself once more through light. You begin to understand how closely your awareness is tied to these subtle changes. You do not check a device, you observe, you feel, you respond. A quirky but telling detail is that in some homes, people could estimate the time of day simply by the position of light within a room, watching how it moved across a wall or floor throughout the day. You find yourself doing that now. The patch of light near the doorway has shifted slightly. It tells you more than any number could. You sit for a moment, letting your body rest again, feeling the warmth from the fire, the solidity of the structure around you. There is a sense of enclosure here, not in a restrictive way, but in a protective one. Outside, the world is open, exposed to weather and movement. Inside, there is a boundary, not perfect, not sealed, but enough. You begin to appreciate how this space supports your life. It shields you from the elements, concentrates warmth, and provides a place where tasks can be carried out with some degree of control. Yet it also demands your attention. The fire must be maintained, the structure must be cared for. Small repairs, adjustments, and constant awareness keep it functional. Nothing here operates on its own. An enduring observation from historical life is that homes were active environments requiring ongoing effort to remain livable. You do not simply exist within them. You participate in their upkeep. You feel that connection now. You are not separate from this place, you are part of it. You glance once more at the hearth, at the steady flame that continues to define the space. It is the anchor, the constant around which everything else moves. And as you sit there surrounded by the textures, the light, the quiet presence of your home, you begin to understand how deeply your environment shapes your experience. This is not just where you live, it is how you live. As you remain inside, letting your body recover from the steady rhythm of work, another detail begins to rise into your awareness. It is not something you see, it is something you smell. At first, it blends into everything else so constant that it almost disappears. But the longer you sit, the more you notice how layered it is. The air is not neutral here. It carries the quiet history of everything that happens within these walls. A broadly accepted fact of pre-modern life is that strong persistent smells were an ordinary part of daily existence due to limited sanitation, ventilation and cleaning technologies. People did not live in odorless environments. They lived within them. You breathe in slowly and the layers begin to separate. There is the scent of smoke always present, woven into the air like a background note that never fades. It settles into your clothing, your hair, your skin. Over time, it becomes so familiar that it no longer feels intrusive. Beneath that, there is the smell of food, not just the meal you prepared earlier, but traces of previous meals absorbed into the surfaces around you. Wood fabric, even the walls themselves seem to hold on to these scents, releasing them slowly over time. You shift slightly and another note emerges. Earth. Whether it comes from the floor, from item brought in from outside, or from the simple fact that the boundary between indoors and outdoors is not fully sealed, it is there. A grounded, slightly damp scent that reminds you how close you are to the natural world. A lesser known but revealing detail is that people in earlier periods often had a much higher tolerance for these overlapping smells, not because they preferred them, but because they were constant and unavoidable. Cleanliness existed, but it did not erase scent in the way modern systems can. You begin to understand how your senses adapt. At first, each smell feels distinct, even surprising. But as you sit with them, they begin to merge into a single atmosphere, something that defines the space rather than interrupts it. You move slightly closer to the hearth and the smoke grows stronger for a moment. It is not harsh, but it is noticeable, especially when the fire shifts or a piece of wood settles. You watch the flame again, noticing how it affects the air. There is a subtle movement, currents of warmth rising and cooler air drawing in. The smoke follows these currents, drifting upward, then spreading, then slowly finding its way out through whatever openings exist. Scholars still debate how prolonged exposure to indoor smoke affected long-term health in historical populations. Some argue that it contributed significantly to respiratory issues, while others suggest that gradual adaptation may have reduced its immediate impact. You feel a slight irritation in your throat as you breathe deeply, a reminder that adaptation takes time. You step away from the fire and the air shifts again. Now the cooler scents return softer but still present. You notice how movement changes your perception, how each part of the room carries its own subtle variation. A curious observation recorded in some historical accounts is that certain smells were closely associated with specific activities or times of day. The scent of fresh bread might signal morning, while the deeper, heavier smells of cooked meals might linger into the evening. You imagine how these patterns would become familiar, almost comforting. You begin to associate certain scents with certain moments, creating a kind of sensory memory that guides your understanding of the day. You walk toward a storage area again and the smell changes slightly once more. Here it is drier, perhaps carrying the faint scent of stored grain or preserved items. There is a stillness to it, a quiet absence of movement that keeps the air more stable. An established perspective among historians is that managing food storage without refrigeration required careful attention not only to temperature but also to airflow and dryness. Smell could serve as an early indicator of spoilage or contamination. You realize that your nose is not just experiencing the environment. It is helping you interpret it. You return to the center of the room, taking in the full atmosphere again. It is complex, layered, alive in a way that feels both unfamiliar and strangely grounding. Nothing here is sterile. Everything carries a trace of its past. You sit once more, letting yourself settle into that awareness. The warmth of the fire, the texture of the air, the subtle blend of scents all combine into a single experience. It is immersive, unavoidable, and deeply connected to the way you live. A small but intriguing detail is that people sometimes use natural materials such as herbs or flowers to influence the smell of their environment, placing them near living spaces or adding them to fires for a more pleasant aroma. You imagine the faint hint of something fresh cutting through the heavier scents, a small effort to shape the atmosphere in a more desirable way. It would not remove the other smells, but it would add to them, creating a new layer. You breathe in, again slower this time. There is something almost calming in accepting this environment as it is without trying to control it completely. It asks you to be present, to notice, to adjust. Just rather than erase. You begin to see how this shapes your awareness. In a world without constant artificial interference, your senses become more active, more engaged. You notice changes more quickly. You respond more naturally. The air is not just something you move through, it is something you experience. You glance toward the doorway where a faint current of fresher air slips in. It carries different scent, lighter, more open, hinting at the world beyond the walls. The contrast is subtle but meaningful. Inside, the air tells the story of your daily life. Outside, it speaks of something broader, less contained. You sit there for a moment longer, breathing slowly, letting the layers of scent settle into something familiar. And as you do, you begin to understand that even something as simple as the air around you is shaped by this slower, more connected way of living. Nothing is hidden, everything lingers, and you, quietly aware, begin to move with it rather than against it. After a while, your attention shifts from the air around you to something more practical, more immediate. Water. It is easy to overlook at first, especially when compared to fire or food. But the more you think about it, the more you realize how central it is to everything you do. Drinking, cooking, cleaning, even small comforts all depend on it. And unlike modern life, it does not arrive quietly through hidden pipes. You must go to it. A widely accepted fact is that before modern infrastructure, access to clean water required daily effort, often involving travel to wells, rivers, or communal sources. Water was not something you turned on. It was something you obtained. You gather what you need to carry it, perhaps a bucket, perhaps a container shaped from wood or clay. You lift it feeling its weight even before it's filled. It reminds you that what you're about to do is not trivial. It will require effort and, more importantly, repetition. You step outside once again. The air greets you differently now. The day has moved forward. The softness of early morning has given way to a clearer, more defined brightness. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly warmer, though still carrying traces of the night's coolness. You begin to walk. The path to the water source is familiar, though not necessarily easy. It may be uneven, shaped by footsteps over time, rather than careful design. You watch where you place your feet, aware that a misstep could mean a stumble or worse, spilling what you work to carry. A lesser-known but telling detail is that in many communities, paths to water sources became some of the most frequently travelled routes, worn smooth by daily use. They were quiet lines of connection between household and necessity. You follow that line now. As you walk, you notice others doing the same. There is a shared understanding in these movements, a quiet acknowledgement that this task belongs to everyone, a nod, a brief glance, perhaps a few words exchanged. Nothing elaborate, just enough to recognize each other within the rhythm of the day. Historians still debate whether these daily journeys to gather water strengthened community bonds, or were simply accepted as routine without deeper social meaning. Walking alongside others, even in silence, you sense that both interpretations might hold some truth. There is connection here, even if it is subtle. You reach the water source. It may be a well, its opening framed by worn edges, or a river moving steadily with a soft, continuous sound. Either way, the presence of water feels immediate, almost grounding. You pause for a moment. There is something about water that invites stillness. The way it reflects light, the way it moves or rests, the way it contrasts with the solid surfaces around it. You lower your container carefully. If it is a well, you manage the rope, feeling its tension guiding the bucket downward until you hear the faint, satisfying sound of contact. If it is a river, you kneel, slightly dipping the container beneath the surface, watching the ripples spread outward. A curious detail from historical practices is that people often develop specific techniques for drawing water, efficiently minimizing spillage and effort. Small adjustments in movement could make a noticeable difference over time. You feel that now as you lift. The weight increases, suddenly pulling against your arms. It is not overwhelming, but it demands attention. You steady yourself, adjusting your grip, making sure the container remains balanced. Water has weight in a way you rarely consider in your own time. Here you feel it fully. You take a breath, preparing for the return. The journey back is slower, not because the distance has changed, but because what you carry has. Each step must be more deliberate. The container shifts slightly with your movement, and you instinctively compensate, keeping it steady. A well-documented aspect of daily life in this era is that tasks like water carrying were repeated multiple times throughout the day. One trip was rarely enough. The effort was ongoing, woven into the routine of life. You begin to understand how this shapes your energy. You cannot afford to be careless. You cannot waste effort. Each movement matters, not just for this moment, but for the many times you will repeat it. You walk steadily, focusing on the rhythm of your steps. There is a quiet determination in this. You are not rushing, you are maintaining control. A small but intriguing observation is that over time, people often develop remarkable balance and efficiency in carrying water, sometimes using tools or techniques that allow them to manage heavier loads with less strain. You sense the beginnings of that adaptation even now. You reach your home again, setting the container down with care. There is a brief moment of relief as the weight leaves your arms, your shoulders easing, your breath deepening. You look at the water, still and clear within its container. It represents effort. It represents time. And it will be used carefully. An established understanding among scholars is that water was often used with great awareness, each portion allocated thoughtfully. There was little room for waste. Every use had purpose. You begin to divide it mentally. Some for drinking, some for cooking, some perhaps for washing, though that may be limited. You realize how different this is from what you are used to. Water is not abundant in the same way. It is present, but it requires your participation. You lift a smaller portion, bringing it closer, taking a drink. It is cool, refreshing in a way that feels earned. There is no distraction here, no rushing, just the simple act of drinking fully experienced. You set it down again, aware of how much remains. You will return for more later, that is certain. You move back towards the hearth, placing the water where it can be used when needed. The fire continues to burn steadily, ready to transform it if required, to heat it, to prepare it for other uses. You stand there for a moment, taking in the scene. The fire, the water, the structure around you. Each element connected, each one dependent on your effort. And as you step back, preparing to continue with the rest of your day, you carry with you a growing understanding. Nothing here is automatic. Everything flows through your hands. You begin to notice it before it fully arrives. The light outside has shifted again, though not in a dramatic way. It is subtle, almost quiet, like a slow breath being released across the sky. The brightness that once felt steady now softens just slightly, and the shadows stretch longer across the ground. Something is changing, not suddenly, not sharply, but inevitably. A widely accepted observation is that in a world without electricity, nightfall was one of the most defining transitions of the day, influencing behavior, movement, and even emotion. As the sun lowered, life adjusted with it. You step outside and pause, letting your eyes take in the scene. The colours are different now. They feel warmer, deeper, touched by a kind of fading glow that makes everything appear softer, less defined. The edges of objects begin to blur once more, just as they did the evening before, but now you recognise it. This is not unfamiliar anymore. It is expected. You feel it in your body as well. The steady rhythm of work that carried you through the day begins to ease. Your movements slow, not out of exhaustion alone, but because the environment itself invites it. There is less urgency now, less visibility, less reason to push forward. A curious detail noted in historical life is that many tasks were intentionally structured to end Before darkness fully set in, people planned their activities around the available light, often stopping work not when it was complete, but when it was no longer practical to continue. You begin to understand why. You attempt a small task, something simple, and immediately notice the difference. Your eyes strain slightly. Details that were clear earlier now require effort to see. You lean closer, adjust your position, but the result is the same. The light is leaving. Historians still debate whether this natural limitation led to a healthier balance between work and rest, or whether it created frustration when tasks remained unfinished. Standing here, you sense both. There is relief in letting go of the day's demands, but there is also a quiet awareness of what remains undone. You turn back toward your home, already anticipating the shift that will take place inside. As you enter, the difference is even more pronounced. The interior darkens quickly. The small amount of daylight that filtered through the openings begins to fade, leaving the space dim and uncertain. Familiar shapes lose their clarity, again retreating into shadow. You reach instinctively for the light. The candle or lamp you used before waits where you left it. You prepare it carefully, aware that this small flame will define your evening. A well-documented reality of this time is that artificial light was used sparingly, often reserved for essential tasks or shared moments rather than extended activity. You light it. The flame appears steady at first, then flickering gently as it settles. The room transforms once more, not into brightness, but into a small, contained world. The circle of light returns. You move within it, naturally drawn to its warmth and clarity. Beyond it, the darkness gathers again, patient, unmoving. A lesser-known but fascinating detail is that many people adjusted their evening behavior to minimize the need for light-choosing activities that required less visibility or could be done by memory or touch. You find yourself doing the same. You sit closer to the flame, arranging your space so that what you need is within reach. Movements become smaller, more deliberate. There is no wandering aimlessly through the room now. Each step has purpose. The sounds change as well. Outside, the world grows quieter, though not silent. There are distant noises, occasional movement, but they feel farther away, less connected to you. Inside, the crackle of the fire and the faint movement of the flame become more prominent. You listen. It's a different kind of attention. Without the distraction of bright light or constant activity, your awareness shifts inward. You notice small details more clearly. The way the flame bends when you move, the soft sound of your own breathing, the subtle warmth against your hands. A scholarly discussion often raised is whether people in pre-electric times experienced evenings as more reflective and introspective due to these conditions. Without external stimulation, the mind may have turned more naturally toward thought, memory, and quiet observation. You feel that happening now. Your thoughts slow. They stretch out, less hurried, more connected. There is space between them. You sit there watching the flame, letting time pass without measuring it. There is no need to check anything. No device reminding you of what comes next. The evening unfolds on its own. A quirky observation from historical writings is that people sometimes describe the coming of night as something that felt almost alive, as though darkness itself was entering the space rather than simply replacing the light. You can understand that feeling. It is not just absence, it is presence. You glance toward the edge of the room where the light fades into shadow. It feels deeper now, more complete. You cannot see into it fully, and that uncertainty shapes your behavior. You stay close to the light. You remain within its boundary. A widely recognized aspect of life in this time is that night limited movement significantly, both for practical and safety reasons. Without reliable lighting, even familiar spaces could become difficult to navigate. You feel it's a limitation now. It is not restrictive in a harsh way. It is guiding. It tells you where to be, how to move, when to slow down. You lean back slightly, letting your body rest. The day has taken its share of your energy, and now the environment itself encourages you to release what remains. The flame continues to flicker, steady and quiet. The darkness remains just beyond it, waiting, not threatening but undeniable. You take a slow breath, feeling the calm settle over you. The day is ending. Not with noise, not with urgency, but with a gentle fading that feels almost natural, almost expected. And as you sit there surrounded by the soft glow of your small light, you begin to understand how deeply night shapes not just what you do, but how you feel. It does not ask you to continue. It invites you to stop. You remain within that small circle of light, noticing how your hands naturally come to rest. There is no urge to reach for anything glowing, no silent pull toward a screen or distant noise. Instead, your attention drifts toward what is already around you. The quiet, the fire, the presence of others if they are nearby. Evening here is not empty. It is simply different. A widely accepted understanding is that before electricity, people filled their evenings with simple forms of entertainment that required little light and encouraged closeness. These were not grand spectacles, but small shared experiences that unfolded gently within the limits of the flame. You shift slightly, settling more comfortably. Someone might begin to speak, not loudly, not in a way that demands attention, but in a tone that feels natural for the space. A story perhaps one told many times before, but still worth hearing again. The rhythm of it is slow, steady, shaped by memory rather than performance. You listen. The words rise and fall like the flicker of the flame, sometimes clear, sometimes softer, but always present. You do not need to see every detail. You build the images in your mind, filling in the spaces with your own imagination. A curious detail from historical life is that oral storytelling was a primary form of entertainment for many communities, allowing knowledge, humour, and tradition to pass from one generation to the next without written records. You begin to understand how powerful that can be. Without constant visual input, your mind becomes more active, more engaged in creating the scene. The story feels personal, shaped partly by the speaker and partly by you. You notice how the others around you respond. A quiet laugh, a small nod, a shared moment of recognition when something familiar is mentioned. These reactions are subtle, but they carry meaning. They connect you not just through the story, but through the experience of hearing it together. Historians still debate whether this kind of shared storytelling created stronger communal bonds than modern forms of entertainment, or whether it simply reflected the limitations of the time. Sitting here, you sense that it offered something unique, something difficult to replicate. There is no distance between you and the moment. You're fully present. The story fades gradually, not with a clear ending, but with a natural pause. No one rushes to fill the silence. It lingers, comfortable, unforced. Then another form of entertainment begins, perhaps music. A simple instrument maybe, or even just a voice. The sound is soft-shaped to fit the space, not to overpower it. It carries through the room, blending with the crackle of the fire, creating a layered rhythm that feels almost soothing. A lesser-known detail is that music in this period was often participatory rather than performed for an audience. People sang together, shared melodies, and created sound collectively rather than consuming it passively. You find yourself drawn into that. Even if you do not join in, you feel the presence of it, the way it fills the space without demanding attention. It becomes part of the environment, like the warmth of the fire or the soft movement of the flame. You notice how your body responds. Your breathing slows, your shoulders relax. There is no pressure to react, to respond, to move quickly. You're allowed to simply be here within the sound, within the moment. A scholarly perspective often explored is whether the slower pace of evening activities contributed to a more balanced mental state compared to modern life. Without constant stimulation, the mind may have had more opportunity to settle. You feel that settling now. Your thoughts are not racing. They move gently one to the next without urgency. The music fades just as the story did, leaving behind another layer of quiet. It is not empty. It is full in a different way. You glance at the flame again. It continues to burn steadily. Its light unchanged, its presence constant. It feels almost like a companion, something that anchors the space, giving shape to everything that happens within it. A small but intriguing detail from historical accounts is that people often judged the passage of the evening by how much of the candle had burned down rather than by any formal measure of time. You look at it now, noticing the subtle change. The candle is shorter, the oil level is lower. Time is visible. You lean back slightly, letting your body sink into a more restful position. There is no expectation of productivity here. The day's work has ended, and what remains is simply this: presence, connection, quiet. A quirky observation from the past is that some people used evenings to engage in small, repetitive tasks that required minimal light, such as mending or simple crafting, allowing their hands to stay busy while their minds remained calm. You imagine that now. Hands moving slowly, guided by touch more than sight, creating or repairing something small while the rest of your attention drifts. It is not about efficiency. It is about continuities. You notice how different this feels from your own time. There is no constant shift between activities, no rapid changes in focus. Instead, everything flows gently from one moment to the next, connected by a shared sense of calm. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth, hearing the quiet sounds around you. The evening does not demand anything from you. It simply unfolds. And as you sit there within that small flickering world, you begin to understand that entertainment here is not about distraction. It is about presence. It draws you in not by overwhelming your senses, but by giving them just enough to engage, just enough to keep you gently aware. The flame flickers once more, steady and soft, and you remain there listening, watching, simply existing within the quiet rhythm of the night. As the evening settles deeper, you begin to feel a quiet shift within yourself. It is not sudden, not overwhelming, just a gentle pull, as though your body is responding to something older than habit, something shaped by light and darkness rather than schedules or decisions. Your eyelids grow heavier, your movements slow even further, and without really planning it, you begin to prepare for sleep. A well-established fact is that before widespread artificial lighting, human sleep patterns often differed from what many people experience today. Rather than a single uninterrupted stretch sleep could occur in segments shaped by the natural rhythm of night. You move closer to where you will rest. The space is familiar now, shaped by simplicity rather than excess. The surface beneath you is firm, perhaps layered with fabric or straw, carrying a faint warmth from earlier use. It is not luxurious, but it is enough. You lower yourself, slowly adjusting your position, feeling the subtle unevenness beneath you. It is grounding. There is no sudden collapse into comfort. Instead, you settle gradually, your body finding its place through small adjustments, small shifts that bring a quiet sense of ease. A curious detail from historical records suggests that many people experienced what is sometimes called first sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. During that time, they might sit quietly, reflect, or engage in small tasks before returning to rest. You lie there considering that idea. It does not feel strange. In fact, it feels natural. Historians still debate whether this segmented sleep pattern was universal or varied widely depending on region and lifestyle. Some evidence points to it being common, while other accounts suggest more continuous rest. You sense that it likely depended on many factors: the season, the level of activity during the day, the environment itself. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. The flame still burns, though smaller now. The room is dim, the shadows deeper, the edges of things less certain. You consider whether to let the light continue or to allow the darkness to take over. A widely recognized reality is that many people would extinguish their light earlier in the night to conserve resources, accepting darkness as part of rest rather than something to resist. You reach out and gently reduce the flame. The change is immediate. The room softens further, the shadows deepening until they merge into a quiet, complete darkness. There is no glow left behind, no faint light from distant sources. Only night. You lie back again, feeling the difference. Without light, your other senses become more present. You hear the faint crackle of the fire as it settles, the subtle shift of the structure around you. The distant sounds from outside, softer, now less frequent. A scholarly discussion often raised is whether this level of darkness allowed for deeper rest, or whether it introduced a different kind of awareness during the night. Without artificial light, the boundary between waking and sleeping may have felt more fluid. You feel that fluidity now. You're not fully asleep, not fully awake, just drifting. Your thoughts slow, stretching out, becoming less defined. Images form briefly, then dissolve. Sounds fade in and out of your awareness. Time loosens its grip. A small but intriguing observation is that in this kind of environment, people often relied on internal cues rather than external signals to move between states of rest and wakefulness. You notice how your body responds. There is no pressure to sleep immediately, no expectation that rest must come all at once. Instead, you allow yourself to drift. At some point, you slip into sleep. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost unnoticed. And then, without knowing how much time has passed, you find yourself awake again. The darkness remains. The world is still. You lie there aware but calm. This is the space between sleeps. You do not feel restless. You do not reach for anything. Instead, you remain where you are, letting your thoughts move gently. A quirky detail from historical accounts suggests that some people use this time for quiet reflection prayer or simple observation, treating it as a natural pause rather than an interruption. You understand that instinct. There is something peaceful in this stillness, something that does not need to be filled. You listen again. The sounds are even softer now. The fire has diminished its presence, reduced to a faint occasional crackle. The air feels cooler. Everything is quieter. You shift slightly, adjusting your position, then close your eyes once more. There is no effort in it, no resistance, just a gradual return to rest. You drift again deeper this time, your body fully releasing the tension of the day. A broadly accepted insight is that without artificial interference, sleep often followed the natural needs of the body, more closely allowing for variation rather than strict uniformity. You feel that variation now. There is no single pattern, only a gentle rhythm that carries you forward. And as you sink into that rhythm, the darkness no longer feels like something separate. It feels like a part of you. A quiet space where everything slows, softens, and eventually fades into rest. At some point in the night, you wake again. Not fully, not with urgency, just enough to notice that something has changed. The darkness feels deeper now, heavier in a quiet way that settles over everything. The faint sounds you heard earlier have faded even further. The world outside seems to have withdrawn almost completely, leaving behind a stillness that feels almost complete. You lie there, eyes open, though it makes little difference. There is nothing to see. A commonly recognized historical reality is that nights before artificial lighting were far darker than anything most people experience today. Without distant streetlights or glowing windows, entire landscapes could disappear into near total blackness once the sun was gone. You feel that now. The room around you is not just dim, it is absent. Only your only your memory of it remain. You shift slightly, listening. Your senses stretch outward, searching for something to hold on to, a sound, a movement. Anything that confirms the world is still there. You hear the faintest creak, then silence again. A curious detail from historical life is that people often developed a heightened awareness of nighttime sounds, learning to distinguish between ordinary noises and those that might signal something unusual. You begin to understand that instinct. Every small sound carries weight. The settling of wood, the distant movement of wind, the soft, almost imperceptible shift of something outside. Each one invites attention. Historians still debate whether fear of the night was more intense in earlier periods, or whether familiarity reduced its impact. Some accounts describe deep unease, while others suggest that people accepted darkness as a natural part of life. Lying here, you sense both possibilities at once. There is calm, but there is also uncertainty. You glance toward where the door should be, though you cannot see it. The darkness leaves space for imagination, and your mind begins to fill it, not with anything specific, but with possibilities. What lies beyond that threshold? What moves outside your awareness? A lesser-known but fascinating aspect of pre-modern belief is that night was often associated with superstition, with stories of unseen forces, spirits, or dangers that emerged when the light disappeared. You can feel how those ideas might take hold. Without light, without clear boundaries, the world feels less defined. More open, more uncertain. You draw your covering slightly closer around you, not out of fear exactly, but out of instinct. A small gesture of comfort, a way to create a boundary between yourself and the unknown. You listen again. This time a distant sound reaches you, perhaps the call of an animal. Low, faint, gone almost as soon as it arrives. It does not alarm you, but it reminds you that the night is not empty. It is active in ways you cannot fully observe. A scholarly discussion often raised is whether these nighttime experiences shaped human imagination more strongly in earlier periods. Without constant visual clarity, the mind may have relied more heavily on interpretation, on filling in what could not be seen. You feel that happening now. Your thoughts become more vivid, more responsive to the absence of certainty. You take a slow breath, letting it out carefully. There is a rhythm to your breathing that begins to anchor you, to bring you back from the edges of that uncertainty. You focus on it. In, out, stay. A quirky detail from some historical accounts is that people sometimes use small rituals or habits to ease themselves during the night, whether through whispered words, quiet movements, or simply focusing on familiar sensations. You find your own version of that now. The feel of the fabric beneath your hands, the subtle warmth that still lingers from earlier, the sound of your own breathing. These become your points of reference. Gradually the tension softens. The darkness remains, but it feels less overwhelming. More like a presence you can coexist with rather than something that presses against you. You turn slightly, adjusting your position, allowing your body to settle more comfortably. There is no need to fully wake. No task waiting for you. Only this moment. An established perspective among historians is that people in earlier times often accepted interruptions in sleep as normal, not something to resist or fix. Wakefulness during the night was simply part of the rhythm. You begin to accept that as well. There is no frustration, no attempt to force sleep. You simply exist within the quiet. The sounds return slowly. A faint movement, a distant shift. The world, though hidden, continues. You close your eyes again, not because you must, but because it feels natural. Your thoughts begin to loosen once more, drifting away from the sharp awareness of a moment ago. The darkness no longer feels like something to question. It becomes a backdrop, a space in which your mind can rest. And as you settle deeper, your breathing steady, your body relaxed, the uncertainty fades into something softer. Not gone, but quieted. You drift again, carried by the same gentle rhythm that has guided you through the night. And this time the darkness feels less like the unknown, and more like a place you are learning to understand. When morning eventually returns, it does so quietly again, but something in you has shifted. You rise with a slightly deeper awareness of the world beyond your home. The night has reminded you how limited your reach can be once the light disappears. Now with daylight returning, that reach expands again. You step outside and the space around you feels open, almost wide in comparison to the enclosed warmth of the hearth. Distance exists here in a way you cannot ignore. A widely recognized historical reality is that before modern transportation and lighting travel was slow, physically demanding, and closely tied to daylight hours. Movement across even short distances required planning, effort, and attention. You begin to walk. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, shaped by use rather than precision. You feel each change in texture, each shift in elevation. There is no smooth path guiding you forward, only a route formed by repetition. Your pace settles naturally. Not fast, not slow, just sustainable. You understand quickly that speed is not the goal. Endurance is. A curious detail from historical travel is that people often measured distance, not in exact units, but in time or effort. A place might be described as a morning's walk or an afternoon's journey rather than a specific number. You sense that way of thinking now. You are not counting distance. You are experiencing it. The light of the sun guides you. It shapes your direction, your timing, even your decisions about when to continue and when to stop. You glance at its position without thinking, using it as a quiet reference point. Historians still debate how precisely people could judge time and direction using natural cues alone, but there is little doubt that these skills were more developed than they are for most people today. You feel the beginning of that awareness, the way shadows fall, the angle of light, the subtle changes that signal the passage of time. You continue walking, noticing how the landscape unfolds. Details emerge gradually. A rise in the ground, a cluster of trees, a shift in the scent of the air. Everything reveals itself step by step. A lesser known but revealing aspect of travel in this period is how closely people were connected to their surroundings. Without rapid movement, every change in environment was noticed, absorbed, understood. You feel that connection now. You are not passing through the landscape. You are part of it, moving within it at a pace that allows you to see it fully. The effort becomes more noticeable as you continue. Your legs carry the weight of your body steadily. Your breathing adjusts, your steps remain consistent. There is no mechanical assistance here, no way to ease the physical demand. An established understanding is that travel required both physical strength and careful planning. You had to consider not just the distance, but the terrain, the weather, and the availability of light. You begin to think ahead. How far can you go before the light begins to fade again? What lies between here and there? Where will you stop if needed? These questions are not abstract. They are immediate. A quirky observation from historical accounts is that people often developed mental maps of their surroundings, built not from exact measurements, but from landmarks, experiences, and repeated journeys. You start to form that map, the curve of the path, the shape of a tree. The way the ground dips and rises, these become your points of reference. You pause for a moment looking back. The distance you have already covered feels more significant than it might appear. Not because it is vast, but because you have felt every step of it. There is a quiet satisfaction in that. You turn forward again and continue. The light shifts slightly, reminding you that time is moving. A scholarly discussion often raised is whether the slower pace of travel influenced how people perceive distance and time. Did places feel farther because they required more effort, or closer because each journey was deeply familiar? You sense that both ideas hold weight. Distance here is not just physical. It is experiential. You continue until your body suggests a pause. Not exhaustion, but a need to rest, to adjust, to take in what is around you. You stop standing still, letting your breathing settle. The silence feels different out here. More open, less contained. You hear the movement of air, the distant sounds of life, the subtle shifts of the environment. You are aware of how exposed you are. Not in a way, but in a real one. There is no immediate shelter, no quick return to comfort, only the space around you. A widely acknowledged feature of travel in this time is that it required a constant awareness of surroundings and conditions. You had to remain attentive not just to your path, but to everything around it. You feel that awareness now. You're not distracted. You are present. You take another breath, then begin to move again. The rhythm, step, step, step. Each one carrying you forward, each one part of a larger journey that unfolds not in moments, but in experience. You begin to understand that travel here is not about arriving quickly. It's about moving with intention, with awareness, with respect for the limits of your body and the world around you. And as you continue along the path, guided by the steady light of the sun, you feel a growing connection to that slower, more deliberate way of moving through life. As you return from your journey, your body carries a quiet heaviness, not exhaustion in a sharp sense, but a steady reminder of effort. Your legs feel it first, then your shoulders, then a deeper awareness that your strength has been used and must be restored. You step back inside your home, drawn again to the familiar presence of the hearth. The warmth greets you gently. It feels different now, more necessary. You sit letting your body rest. And it is in this moment of stillness that another reality begins to surface. Illness. Not as an abstract idea, but as something that can enter quietly without warning, shaped by the same environment you've been moving through all day. A widely accepted fact is that before modern medicine, even minor injuries or illnesses could become serious, sometimes life-threatening due to limited knowledge and lack of effective treatments. You consider that as you look at your hands. They carry small marks, scratches, dryness, subtle signs of use. Nothing alarming, but in this world, even small things matter. You run your fingers along one of those marks, noticing the slight tenderness. It is easy to imagine how something like this could change if not cared for properly. A curious detail from historical practices is that people often relied on natural remedies, using plants, herbs, and simple mixtures to treat wounds and sickness. Some were effective. Others were based more on tradition than understanding. You begin to see how knowledge here is built differently. It is passed down, tested through experience, not always certain. Historians still debate how much practical medical knowledge existed among ordinary people, and how much was shaped by a belief or limited observation. The line between effective treatment and hopeful guesswork was often unclear. If you feel that uncertainty now, if you were to fall ill, what would you do? You glance around your space. There is no hidden supply of medicine, no immediate solution waiting for you. Only what you already have. The fire, the water, the materials within reach. A lesser known but important aspect of life in this period is that care often came from within the household or community. People relied on each other, sharing knowledge, offering help, doing what they could with the resources available. You imagine that now. Someone preparing a simple remedy. Someone staying nearby, watching, waiting, offering quiet support. It is not advanced, but it is human. You shift slightly, adjusting your position near the fire. The warmth feels more significant now, not just for comfort, but for its potential role in recovery. Heat can soothe, it can ease, it can provide a small measure of relief. A scholarly perspective often discussed is whether the limitations of medical knowledge led to a greater acceptance of illness as part of life, or whether it created a constant underlying fear of what could not be controlled. You sense both. There is an awareness of risk, but there is also a quiet resilience. You cannot eliminate every danger, so you learn to live with it. You take a slow breath, feeling the air move through your body. It is clear, steady, reassuring in its own way. You are well, at least for now. That awareness carries weight. A quirky but revealing detail is that some people use small daily habits to maintain health, even if they did not fully understand the reasons behind them. Regular movement exposure to fresh air, simple diets. These actions, though not scientifically explained at the time, often contributed to overall well-being. You reflect on your day, the work, the walking, the food you prepared. Each element, though demanding, has supported your body in its own way. You begin to understand how closely health is tied to your daily rhythm. There is no separation between lifestyle and well-being. They are the same. You look again at your hands, then at the fire, then at the space around you. Everything here influences you. The air you breathe, the water you carry, the effort you expend. An established understanding among historians is that life expectancy in earlier periods was often lower, not only because of disease, but because of the cumulative impact of these daily challenges. You feel that reality without fear, but with clarity. This way of life is not easy. It requires strength, awareness, and a certain acceptance of uncertainty. You shift closer to the fire, letting its warmth reach deeper into your muscles. The tension begins to ease your body, slowly recovering from the demands of the day. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to rest. The quiet surrounds you again, familiar now, steady and calm. There is no urgency here, no sudden change, just a gradual return to balance. You open your eyes again, feeling a little more grounded, a little more aware. You understand now that health in this world is not something you take for granted. It is something you maintain, protect, and respect. Each day, each action, each choice. And as you sit there, feeling the warmth, the quiet, the steady rhythm of your own breathing, you carry that understanding with you, not as a burden, but as a quiet truth. You are part of this environment, and it shapes you just as much as you shape it. As the day continues to unfold, you begin to notice something that has been present all along, yet easy to overlook. Other people, not in a distant or abstract sense, but in a way that feels immediate and necessary. Their movements, their voices, their routines intersect with yours more often than you might have liked. You step outside again, and this time your awareness shifts outward. There is activity nearby, not loud, not overwhelming, but steady. Someone passing by, someone working within sight, someone pausing for a brief exchange of words. These moments are small, but they form a pattern. A widely accepted understanding is that before modern conveniences, communities were often tightly interconnected, with individuals relying on one another for labour, knowledge and support. You begin to feel that connection now. It is not forced. It is simply part of how life functions. You move closer to another person, perhaps exchanging a few words. The conversation is brief, practical, shaped by shared understanding. There is no need for long explanations. Much of what needs to be said is already known. A curious detail from historical communities is that people often developed a deep familiarity with each other's routines, recognizing patterns of work and rest simply by observation. You notice that. The way someone carries tools, the way another moves with practiced efficiency. These details tell you more than words might. You continue your own task, but now there is an awareness that you are not doing it alone. Even when you are physically separate, your efforts align with those around you. Historians still debate whether this level of interdependence created stronger social cohesion or whether it limited individual freedom. As you move within this environment, you sense that it offers both support and expectation. You are part of something larger. That brings stability, but it also brings responsibility. You pause watching as someone nearby completes a task. There is a quiet competence in their movements, something learned over time, something refined through repetition. A lesser known but meaningful aspect of community life is the informal sharing of skills. Knowledge passed from one person to another, not through structured teaching, but through observation and participation. You find yourself learning in the same way. You watch, you notice, you adjust your own actions, slightly influenced by what you see. There is no formal instruction, just presence. You continue working, but now there is a subtle exchange happening around you. A tool handed over, a brief comment, a small gesture of assistance. These moments are not dramatic. They are expected. A scholarly perspective often explored is whether such daily interactions created a deeper sense of belonging compared to more isolated modern lifestyles. Without constant physical proximity, would these connections feel as strong? You sense that proximity matters. Seeing people, hearing them, sharing space. It creates a kind of quiet bond. You finish a task and step back, taking a moment to rest. Someone nearby does the same. There is a brief meeting of awareness, a shared pause. No words are needed. The understanding is enough. A quirky observation from historical accounts is that even small social rituals like greeting someone at a well or exchanging brief remarks during work played a significant role in maintaining community cohesion. You begin to appreciate those small rituals. They are simple, but they are consistent. They create continuity. You move again, continuing your work, but now with a slightly different perspective. You're not just completing tasks. You are participating in a system, each person contributing in their own way, each effort supporting the whole. An established historical insight is that survival in many communities depended on cooperation. Individual effort mattered, but collective effort often determined success. You feel that truth now. Your actions matter, but so do theirs. You glance around, noticing how the day is shared. Different tasks, different roles. All connected. You take a slow breath, feeling the rhythm of it. There is something steady about this, something grounding. You are not isolated. You are part of a network, even if it is not formally defined. You continue adjusting your pace to match the flow around you. There is no competition here. No urgency to outpace others, just a shared movement forward. A subtle but important detail is that in many historical settings, time itself was experienced collectively. The start of work, the pause for rest, the transition into evening often occurred in unison, guided by natural cues rather than individual schedules. You notice that alignment in now. The way activity rises and falls together. The way people begin to slow as the light shifts. The way the day feels shared. You pause once more, looking at the space around you. It is not just a place. It is a community, and you are part of it. That realization settles quietly within you. Not overwhelming. Not dramatic, just present. You turn back to your task, continuing with a sense of connection that was not as clear before. And as you move, step by step, action by action, you carry that awareness with you. You are not alone in this slower way of living. You never were. As the days pass in this steady rhythm, you begin to notice something larger than any single task. It is not just morning or evening, not just work or rest. It's a pattern that stretches beyond the day itself. You feel it in the air first, a subtle shift. The light seems to linger a little longer than it did before, or perhaps it fades just a little sooner. The temperature carries a different tone, warmer or cooler, as depending on where you stand and when you pause to notice it. These changes are small, but they are constant. A widely recognized reality is that before modern systems of timekeeping and climate control, people lived closely aligned with seasonal cycles, adjusting their routines based on changes in light temperature and available resources. You begin to understand that your life is not just shaped by the sun's daily rise and fall. It is shaped by its slow movement across the year. You step outside and take in the landscape again. It does not look entirely the same as it did before. The ground may feel softer or firmer. The air may carry different scents. Even the quality of the light has shifted, changing the way everything appears. A curious detail from historical observation is that people often mark the passing of seasons through subtle environmental cues rather than fixed dates. The behavior of animals, the growth of plants, the feel of the wind. You begin to notice those cues now. They are quiet, but they are reliable. Historians still debate how precisely people track time across longer periods without standardized calendars, but there is little doubt that seasonal awareness was deeply embedded in daily life. You feel that awareness growing within you. You begin to anticipate change, not through numbers, through experience. You return to your work, but even that has shifted. The tasks are not identical to those of previous days. They are just responding to what the environment allows or requires. Some activities become more urgent, others less so. An established understanding is that seasonal variation influences nearly every aspect of life, from food preparation to clothing, from travel to rest. You see that clearly now. What you eat changes. What you wear adjusts. Even how long you work is affected. You pause, looking at your surroundings. There is a sense of movement here that is not tied to any single moment. It is gradual, continuous. A lesser known but meaningful aspect of seasonal life is that preparation often occurred long before it was needed. People gathered, stored and planned based on what they knew would come, even if it had not yet arrived. You begin to think in that way, not just about today, but about what follows. What will you need later? What must be done now to make that possible? A scholarly discussion often raised is whether this forward thinking created a stronger connection to time and consequence compared to modern lifestyles where many needs are met instantly. You sense that it does. There is a weight to your actions now, a sense that what you do today shapes what you experience tomorrow. You take a slow breath, feeling the air again. It carries a different quality than it did before. Slight but noticeable. You are becoming more attuned to it. A quirky observation from historical records is that people often use natural landmarks or recurring events such as the first frost or the blooming of certain plants as informal markers of seasonal transition. You imagine noticing such moments, the first sign of something new, the quiet indication that time has moved forward. You continue your work, but now with a broader awareness. You are not just moving through a day, you are moving through a cycle, each action connected to a larger pattern. You begin to see how this shapes your mindset. There is patience here. You cannot rush a season. You cannot force change. You can only respond. An established perspective among historians is that this alignment with natural cycles fostered a different relationship with time, one that emphasized continuity rather than constant acceleration. You feel that continuity now. There is no need to hurry. The rhythm will carry you forward. You pause again, letting your body rest, your mind absorbing the moment. The light has shifted slightly once more. The air feels just a little different. These small changes are becoming familiar. You are learning to read them. You glance around, noticing how everything exists within this larger pattern. The land, the people, yourself, all moving together. You take another breath, deeper this time, and let it out slowly. There is a calm in this awareness, a sense that you are part of something steady, something reliable, something that does not need to be controlled. You return to your task, continuing with that understanding in the background. And as you move forward, you carry with you a growing sense that life here is not just about the present moment. It is about the cycle, the quiet, unbroken flow that shapes everything you do. As evening approaches once more, your attention returns to something you now understand more clearly than before. Light, not the effortless kind you once knew, but the kind that must be created, protected, and measured with care. You move toward the small supply, you are aware that what remains is not endless. A candle, perhaps slightly uneven from previous use. A small container of oil, its level lower than it was yesterday. These are not conveniences, they are resources. A well-documented fact is that in pre-electric societies, artificial light was relatively expensive and often reserved for essential activities, making its use a deliberate choice rather than a constant presence. You hold the candle for a moment, feeling its weight, noticing the subtle marks left by previous evenings. Each layer of melted wax tells a small story of time spent, of moments illuminated and then gone. You consider whether to light it now or wait. That decision carries more meaning than it might seem. A curious detail from historical life is that people often plan their evenings around the availability of light, sometimes delaying certain activities until it was absolutely necessary to use a flame. You understand that instinct. You look around the room, gauging what can still be done with the fading daylight. The light from outside is soft now, but not completely gone. It lingers, offering just enough visibility to move to prepare to think. You use that time carefully. You arrange what you need. You bring items closer. You reduce the need for movement later. Historians still debate whether the scarcity of artificial light encouraged greater efficiency in evening routines or simply limited what could be accomplished. Standing here, you sense that it does both. You become more intentional, more aware. You finally decide. You light the candle. The flame appears small but steady, and once again the room reshapes itself around it. The circle of light returns familiar now, almost comforting. But you notice something different. You are more conscious of it. You watch the flame more coolly, aware of how it consumes the wick, how the wax softens and shifts, how each moment of light is also a moment of use. A lesser known but fascinating aspect of historical lighting is that people often develop techniques to extend the life of their candles, trimming wicks or adjusting placement to reduce waste. You find yourself doing the same. You position it carefully, ensuring that the flame burns evenly, that it does not flicker too wildly, that it serves its purpose without unnecessary loss. A scholarly perspective often explored is whether this careful management of light influenced how people valued time itself, making each illuminated moment feel more significant. You feel that connection now. The light is not background. It is central. You sit within its reach, keeping your movements contained. There is no wandering into darker parts of the room unless absolutely necessary. The flame defines your space, your actions, your focus. A quirky detail from the past is that some households use multiple small light sources rather than one large one, distributing light carefully to manage both visibility and cost. You imagine how that might look. Several small points of light, each creating its own circle, each carefully placed. But here you have one, and it is enough. You glance toward the edge of the room where the light fades into shadow. The contrast feels sharper, now more defined. The boundary between light and dark is clear, almost tangible. You remain within it. A widely recognized reality is that the limited reach of artificial light shaped social behavior, encouraging people to gather closely rather than spread out. You feel that effect. Even if you're alone, your space is concentrated. Your world is smaller, more focused. You lean slightly closer to the flame, feeling its warmth, watching its movement. It is not just a tool. This is something you observe, something you engage with. A subtle but meaningful observation from historical accounts is that the act of tending a light could become almost meditative, a quiet routine that grounded people into the present moment. You begin to experience the way the flame shifts, the way it responds to your movement, the way it holds steady when left undisturbed. You are aware of it in a way you rarely are with modern light. Time passes and you notice the change. The candle is shorter, the oil is lower, the flame is the same but its future is not. You begin to think ahead. How much longer will it last? Is there enough for tomorrow? These questions are not distant. They are immediate. An established understanding is that managing limited resources required constant awareness and planning, even in small everyday tasks. You feel that awareness now. It is not stressful. It is simply present. You adjust your position again, keeping within the light, conserving its use. You choose your actions carefully, avoiding anything that would require unnecessary movement or extended illumination. There is a quiet discipline in this. You are not limiting yourself. You're aligning with what is available. You take a slow breath, watching the flame once more. It continues to burn steady and calm, offering just enough light to carry you through this part of the evening. And as you sit there, aware of its value, its limits, and its quiet presence, you begin to understand how something so small can shape so much. Light is no longer something you take for granted. It is something you respect, something you protect, something you use with care. And within that small circle of flame, your world feels both limited and complete at the same time. As the candle burns lower, the room grows quieter in a way that feels deeper than before. You are no longer thinking about tasks, no longer planning what comes next. Instead, you find yourself sitting in a space that feels almost suspended, held gently between the fading of the day and the full arrival of night. The flame flickers steady but smaller now, and your attention rests on it without effort. A widely recognized observation is that life without constant artificial stimulation often created natural moments of stillness where the mind was not occupied by external demands but allowed to settle into quiet awareness. You feel that stillness now. It is not empty. It is full in a softer way. In a softer way. Your thoughts move differently here. Slower, less crowded. They rise gently one at a time, without urgency. You do not chase them. You simply notice them, then let them pass. A curious detail from historical accounts is that people often spent quiet moments in reflection without formal structure, not as a task, but as a natural part of the day's rhythm. You understand that instinct. There is no need to fill this time, no need to reach for something to occupy your attention. The quiet itself is enough. You shift slightly, adjusting your posture, and the small movement feels more noticeable than it might in a noisier world. The fabric beneath you moves softly. The air responds subtly. Everything feels more present. Historians still debate whether this kind of environment encouraged deeper introspection or whether it simply reflected a lack of alternatives. Sitting here, you sense that the quiet creates an opportunity, one that can be accepted or ignored. You accept it. You let your awareness expand slightly, noticing the space around you without trying to define it too clearly. The edges of the room remain in shadow, but they no longer feel uncertain. They feel distant, contained. The flame remains your focus, but not in a demanding way. It is simply there, offering a point of reference, a small constant in the softness of the moment. A lesser known but meaningful aspect of pre-modern life is that extended periods of low stimulation may have supported a different kind of mental rest, allowing the mind to process experiences without interruption. You feel that processing now. The day begins to settle within you. The work you did, the movement, the small interactions, they pass through your thoughts gently without resistance. A scholarly discussion often raised is whether this slower mental pace contributed to a different perception of time, one that felt less pressured and more expansive. You sense that expansiveness here. Time is not something you're measuring. It is something you are experiencing. You take a slow breath, noticing the way it fills your chest, the way it releases. The rhythm of it becomes more apparent, more steady. In, out. Simple. A quirky observation from historical writings is that people sometimes described moments like this as feeling almost outside of time, where the usual sense of progression softened into something less defined. You begin to understand that description. There is no urgency here, no demand, just presence. You glance once more at the candle. It is nearing its end. The flame remains steady, but you can see how little remains to support it. The wax has melted down, the wick shorter, the light slightly softer than before. You do not rush to replace it. You accept its limit. An established insight is that in a world of finite resources, endings were more visible and more immediate, encouraging a quiet acceptance rather than avoidance. You feel that acceptance now. The light will go out, and that is part of the rhythm. You lean back slightly, letting your body relax further. The warmth from the fire is faint now, the air cooler but not uncomfortable, just present. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep but to feel the space without sight. The darkness behind your eyelids is no different from the darkness around you. It feels consistent, calm. You open your eyes again and the flame is still there, smaller, softer but steady. You watch it without thinking. without expectation. A subtle but important observation is that in such moments, attention becomes less about doing and more about being, allowing the mind to settle into a quieter state. You remain there, letting that state deepen. The room feels still. The world feels distant. Your thoughts slow even further, becoming less defined, more like impressions than clear ideas. You do not resist it. You allow it. The flame flickers once more, then steadies again, and you, sitting quietly within its diminishing light, begin to feel the gentle pull toward rest returning. Not as a demand, but as an invitation. The flame grows smaller and you feel it before you fully see it. There is a subtle dimming, a soft reduction in the warmth of the light, as though the room itself is preparing to let go of the day. You remain still, watching, aware that this moment will not be extended. It cannot be. A broadly accepted historical truth is that in a world without electricity, the end of light often marks the true end of activity. When the flame faded, the day was not prolonged. It simply closed. You sit quietly as the candle nears its final moments. The wick glows faintly, the light trembling just slightly as it consumes what little remains. Shadows shift once more, stretching and softening as if they're gently reclaiming the space. You do not reach to stop it. You let it happen. A curious detail recorded in older accounts is that many people developed a calm acceptance of such endings, understanding that cycles you see and rest were unavoidable and even necessary. You begin to feel that acceptance settle within you. There is no frustration, no urgency to replace what is fading, only awareness. Historians still debate whether this acceptance was born from necessity or whether it reflected a deeper philosophical relationship with time and limitation. Sitting here, you sense that it may have been both. You take a slow breath, watching the flame one last time. Then gently it disappears. The darkness returns fully, not gradually, completely. The room is now as it was in the deepest part of the night, without shape, without colour, without visible boundary. You remain where you are, letting your senses adjust. There is no discomfort in this moment, only stillness. A lesser known but meaningful observation is that people in pre-electric times often allowed darkness to signal rest, not just for the body but for the mind as well. Without light, there was little reason to continue thinking in the same way. You feel your thoughts soften almost immediately. They no longer move in clear lines. They drift. You shift slightly, preparing to lie down once more. The space around you is familiar even if you cannot see it. Your body remembers where everything is. You lower yourself carefully, feeling the surface beneath you, adjusting until you find a comfortable position. The air feels cooler now, quieter, more complete. A scholarly reflection often discussed is that full darkness may have encouraged a deeper surrender to rest, allowing the body to align more closely with natural cycles. You feel that pull again, gentle, steady, unavoidable in the best way. A quirky detail from historical life is that some people described this final descent into night as the world itself going to sleep, not just those within it. You can understand that now. Everything feels at rest. You take another breath, slower this time. The rhythm of it becomes more pronounced, guiding you inward. The sounds around you are minimal. A faint shift, a distant echo, then quiet again. You let your eyes close. There is no difference now between open and closed, only darkness. An established understanding is that in environments like this, sleep often arrived not as a sudden event, but as a gradual drifting shaped by the absence of stimulation and the presence of calm. You allow that drift to begin. Your body relaxes further. Your muscles release. Your thoughts become softer, less defined. The day you experienced begins to fade, not sharply but gently, like the light that has just disappeared. You no longer hold on to it. You let it go. The work, the movement, the quiet conversation, all of it settles into the background. You're here now, in this moment, in this stillness. And as you drift deeper, the world feels smaller, quieter, more contained. Not limited, just calm. You breathe slowly, evenly, your awareness narrowing to the simplest sensations. The surface beneath you, the air around you, the steady rhythm of your own breath. Everything else fades. There is no need to think, no need to act, only to rest. And so you do. You drift gently, carried by the same slow rhythm that has guided every part of your day, from the first light of morning to the final fading of the flame. Now everything softens, everything quiets, everything rests. The darkness is no longer something to notice. It is something you are part of. And as you sink fully into that calm, you're breathing deep and steady, the world around you settles into a quiet, unbroken stillness. You are safe here. You are at rest, and there is nothing more you need to do. Now, as the final moments of the day dissolve completely, your mind follows gently behind them. There is no sharp ending, no sudden silence, only a gradual softening. The darkness remains, but it no longer feels like an absence. It feels like a quiet presence holding everything in place, allowing the world to rest without interruption. Your thoughts, once clear and active, now drift like distant echoes. They no longer form complete ideas. They appear briefly, then dissolve before they can take shape. You do not follow them. You let them pass. Your breathing becomes slower, deeper, each inhale and exhale blending into the next. There is a rhythm to it that feels natural, steady, almost soothing. The air around you is still. The space is calm. Everything is settled. You feel the weight of the day fade from your body. The effort, the movement, the small moments of awareness all slip gently into the background, leave behind only a sense of quiet balance. There is nothing to prepare, nothing to anticipate, only this, a soft end of stillness. The kind that invites you to drift further, to release even the last traces of thought, to allow rest to take over completely. And as you sink deeper into that calm, the world feels distant, quiet, and safe. You are carried gently into sleep. Sweet dreams.